I love the town hall
We're going
meetings.
to need you to tell your stories over and over again, to show up at every town meeting.
The time to act is now.
The economy, education, crime, healthcare reform. The White House says it's on a roll, and their polls are up. There's less gridlock. Congress passed a budget, education, and gun control bills. Troops are back from Somalia. Mideast peace seems possible. But in Bosnia, peace remains distant. In Haiti, the military rules. And North Korea resists nuclear inspections. At home, Whitewater continues to plague the Clintons.
A cloud is gathering over the
This is partisan
Whitewater
politics.
is for canoeing and rafting.
But reforming health care is the president's biggest domestic challenge. Tonight, live from Charlotte, North Carolina at the NBC News Channel, people are assembled to ask questions about these and other topics as we spend an evening with the president. Here are Tom Donovan and Kim Hindrew.
Good evening and welcome to our live satellite town hall meeting. I'm Tom Donovan.
And I'm Kim Hindrew. Tom and I anchor NBC Nightside, which is our network's overnight news program. We do that here in Charlotte, North Carolina at the NBC News Channel. The NBC News Channel is the news gathering organization for 209 NBC affiliates across the nation. We also produce NBC Nightside here and Canal de Noticias, which is our Spanish language news broadcast. This is generally a working newsroom, but for the next hour and a half, it will be a television studio. Along with our affiliate WCNC, we have asked Charlotte area residents to join us and to ask the president their questions.
It's been quite a transformation. The president will be joining us momentarily, but first a brief explanation of what will be happening, how we will proceed this evening. Now, in addition to the issues that will be raised here tonight by residents of Charlotte and surrounding communities in North and South Carolina, Mr. Clinton will also be fielding questions from guests gathered at 3 NBC affiliate stations in cities around the country, 3 cities, and they are KXAN in Austin, Texas. Another group is standing by at WCYB, our NBC affiliate in Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee, right along the Virginia-Tennessee border. And third, residents from the Roanoke, Virginia area will be asking questions of the president, and they are standing by at NBC affiliate WSLS. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Welcome, Mr. President.
Thank you.
We will be getting, sir?
I'm hooked up.
All right. We will be getting to our first question for President Clinton, but first he would like to begin with some opening remarks. Mr. President.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for hosting this town meeting, and I want to thank all of you for participating and all the people in the communities that are hooked into us tonight. I try to do a number of these every year as a way of sort of getting in closer touch with the American people, listening to people directly about their concerns, and making a report. Last year, in my first year as president, I devoted most of my time to trying to get the economy back in order, to impose some discipline on the federal budget, and to start investing in growth for the jobs of the 21st century. This year, we are working on trying to keep that economic renewal going. Our economy in 14 months has produced 2.3 million private sector jobs. That's more than twice as many as in the previous 4 years. If the budget, which I have proposed to Congress, passes, we will eliminate another 100 government programs, cut another 200 and something more, and have 3 years of reduction in the federal deficit for the first time since Harry Truman was president of the United States. That's a long time. So we're moving in the right direction. This year, we're also trying to improve our political system. We've got a lobby reform law which will restrict lobbying in Washington and increase reporting requirements for lobbyists, which I think is a very good thing. The Congress just passed, and I just signed, our major education bill for Public Education Goals 2000, which for the first time will set world-class standards of excellence for our public schools and promote all kinds of domestic grassroots reform, school district by school district, to achieve them. We are dealing with welfare reform in the Congress. We are dealing with health care reform, and I know a lot of you have questions about that. I visited today in Troy, North Carolina, in a rural hospital, and with people in that community talking about the problems of providing health care in rural America. And the first item of business, and I will close with this, when the Congress comes back, will be to take up the crime bill. I know you just had a special legislative session here in North Carolina. Governor Hunt proposed some legislation. Our crime bill will put another 100,000 police officers on the street. We'll ban 28 kinds of assault weapons. We'll have a 3 strikes and you're out provision to affect the relatively small number of criminals that commit a large percentage of the truly violent crimes. And we'll provide some funds to communities to try to give our kids a chance to avoid getting in real trouble. More funds for drug treatment, for recreation, for alternatives to imprisonment for first-time offenders. It's going to be a very busy year in Congress. What I want you to know is that this work is going on. Sometimes I think maybe out here in the country, because of what comes across the airwaves, you may not know that the work of the people is going on, and that's my first concern. And we're doing everything we can to push an agenda which would make this year, if we can complete it, even more important to the American people in their future than what happened last year.
Mr. President, we have a question now about government efficiency from Raymond Long.
Mr. President.
Yeah.
The federal government does not presently have a good track record in its operation of other health care programs. Examples are Medicaid and Medicare, where the costs have continued to skyrocket. Also, a very good example are VA hospitals that have empty beds and yet waiting lists, and because of funding, they're not operating at full capacity. In light of that, why do you think we can operate your proposed health care program without adding greatly to our already serious deficit in this country?
Well, that's why I don't propose that the government take it over. My program is guaranteed private insurance. My program is take the people who are working, who don't have health insurance, and extend the same system that they have now. 80% of the people without health insurance in America today are in working families. And what we propose to do is to guarantee them private insurance and then give them the chance to choose their own doctor, choose their own medical plan, and to have a new choice every year, not to have the government run it. But let me just say, sir, I don't agree with you. I don't think Medicare is a poorly run program at all. The Medicare program, I think, has worked right well. It only has a 3% administrative cost. By contrast, most private insurance plans have administrative costs 4 and 5 and 6 times that. So I don't think you can make a very good case that Medicare is not well run. I think it is. Medicaid is growing so fast and Medicare is growing so fast in part because there are more and more people on it because we don't have enough other kinds of insurance. But I don't think that either one of those programs, but particularly the Medicare program, is poorly managed. I think Medicare works real well for elderly people, and I think it ought to be left alone. Under my plan, we leave it alone just as it is. But we don't extend Medicare to the uninsured. We extend private insurance. And I think we should have a private plan. I do believe that you're going to have some way to let small business people and self-employed people buy health insurance at the same competitive rates that people in the government and people in big business get it now. Those of us that are in the federal government have terrific health insurance plans. Why? Because there's a whole lot of us. So we can get good plans. But farmers or self-employed people or small business people, they pay 35 to 40% more because they don't have any buying power. So under our system, what the government does is to create buying pools, almost like old-fashioned farmers' co-ops, so that people can buy insurance that's more adequate for lower cost. In California, the first big buying pool was set up by the state of California this year, and small businesses actually got their insurance at a lower cost. The same thing is about to happen in Florida. So that's what the government does. We require private insurance and provide the buying pools. Otherwise, it should all be left in the private sector. Because I agree with you, we can't run it. We shouldn't try.
Mr. President, you've vowed to veto any health care reform bill that does not include universal health care. Your plan has been changed somewhat. You've compromised, you've been willing to compromise. You still going to stick to that, or would you be willing to accept something short of universal health care? I
think well, let me just quote to you back what the doctors and the nurses and the hospital folks said in Troy, North Carolina today. When we were out there with doctors that had spent their entire life in rural areas, they said, unless you're going to cover everybody, you can't have health care reform. In the hospital I saw in Troy today, 50% of the people who come into the emergency room are people without health insurance. That cost is either going to be passed on to the rest of the folks in Montgomery County who have insurance, or is going to be absorbed by the hospital in ways that undermine their ability to provide health care. We are the only advanced country in the world that doesn't do this. I just refuse to believe we can't figure out how to cover all of our people, just like every country we compete with does. So no, that's something that I don't feel we can compromise on, because if we don't do that, we can't stop this explosion in costs. The gentleman mentioned how much Medicare and Medicaid's going up, how much other cases are going up. One of the ways we're going to get health care costs in line with inflation is to provide insurance to everybody, get primary and preventive care out there, and then let people buy it in a competitive marketplace. So you've got to cover everybody to get that done. So I can't compromise on that.
All right, thank you.
And WCYB.
For the year 2000 were developed at a meeting of the governors and the White House under the previous administration. I represented the governors in that. We stayed up all night long and we wrote those educational goals. The legislation I signed last week, for the first time, actually provides funds to school districts to promote the unemployment system into reemployment system so that people can continuously get education throughout their lifetimes. And fourthly, there is in the crime bill, as well as in this education bill I just signed, a safe schools program which will provide more occur. One of the goals that I worked real hard for back in 1989 to get adopted is that every school ought to be safe, disciplined, and drug-free. And so we have a program here that will enable the schools to do that, and will give our troubled schools, our most troubled schools, extra help to have the kind of security they need and the kind of learning environment they need and the kind of alternative dispute mechanisms our kids need to learn so that they can avoid violence. So all these things are on the education calendar this year. This should be the most important year for education reform in 30 years if all these bills pass, and I think they will.
All right, Mr. President, our next question comes.
Right to our first one. With me is Mike Lindsay. He's a health insurance agent from Rural Retreat, Virginia.
Yes, Mr. President, my question would be, as a health insurance agent, my clients are primarily self-employed and small business owners. I would like to know what's in store for people like myself and my colleagues who these folks depend on. When they have any problem with their insurance, they call us.
Well, they would still be able to buy their insurance from you because we don't propose to abolish private health insurance. What we want to do is to require people who do not have any insurance to buy insurance, with employers paying a portion of the premium and employees paying a portion of the premium. We want to make it possible for you to offer health insurance to small business people and self-employed people at either lower rates or more comprehensive health care services for the rates that you're having to charge now, which is something, as you know, insurance companies can't do economically now if they're insuring people in small pools. So what we propose is some insurance reform that will change the nature of the economics of the health insurance industry, but leave it intact. And let me just basically say what we propose to do. From the point of view of the people buying the health insurance, we want to make it possible for small business people and self-employed people to buy insurance at lower rates without inflation at 35% a year, which is what it's been averaging nationwide. We want to make it illegal for people to have higher rates because somebody in their family's been sick or because they're older. We want to make cutting people off illegal because somebody in their family's been sick, but we don't want to bankrupt insurance companies, so we propose to have people insured in larger pools, which will mean that smaller insurance companies will have to pool together to insure people in larger pools. But that way, it will be economical for the insurance industry to insure people, and the people will be free of these terrible problems. Right now in America, 81 million Americans out of 255 million, 81 million are in families where there is a so-called pre-existing condition, where somebody in that family has been sick, which means either they're paying higher insurance costs, they can't get insurance at all, or they can't change the job they're in because if they do, they can't get insurance in the next job. These things are not this insurance agent's fault. This gentleman who's asked me this question, he can't help that. That's the way the market's organized. So what we have to do is to put people in bigger insurance pools and protect them from those kind of abuses But if they're in bigger pools, then the insurance companies, in essence, will be able to still provide those services, and they'll still be able to make a decent profit. So that's how it will change. Your business will change, but you can still be in business, because I don't propose to take insurance out of this, but to change the way it works so that everybody can be insured at an affordable price.
Now we
My question has to do with the national debt and the deficit that seems to be climbing and increasing all the time. I know you referred to this in your opening remarks, but we're concerned about Social Security and about who has to pay this debt and inflation that might have some bearings upon it. My questions are, should we really be concerned, and what is being done in a substantial way to deal with this, and when will this be resolved and no longer be a problem?
Let me say first, with regard to Social Security. Right now, the Social Security tax brings in more money than is necessary to pay out in Social Security every year. And Social Security should be stable for quite a long while now. I don't think you have to worry about that. Secondly, does the deficit matter? Yes, it does. It matters when we have to take 15 cents of every dollar you pay in taxes to pay an interest on the debt. That's money we can't spend on education or health care or jobs or something else. And it can weaken our economy because we have to borrow money sometimes from overseas. Now, if we keep going right now, the real way to look at the deficit is what is the percentage of our deficit as a percentage of our national income. If you look at it that way and compare it to all the other major economies of the world, our deficit now, we've gotten it low enough so that it's smaller as a percentage of our national income than any of the countries we compete with, major economies except one, except Japan. And if we keep going, we'll get it down below that. We have to keep driving it down. The only way to get it to zero is to go back to the very first question I was asked. The only way to get it to zero, because we're cutting defense all we can, and that gentleman made it, and I don't think we can cut it anymore. And I'm very concerned. I don't want the Congress to cut defense anymore than is in our plan in this budget session. We're cutting defense already. We're cutting domestic spending that's discretionary for the first time since 1969. The only thing that's going up in this budget is that health care costs are still going up at 2 and 3 times the rate of inflation. So the only way we can get the deficit down to zero now is to bring health care costs in line with inflation. And that's what I'm trying hard to do. And I hope we can do that. But as long as the deficit is going down instead of up, which it is now, it will be a smaller and smaller percentage of our income, and our economy will be stronger. And I think you can be confident that we're going in the right direction. And that's the important thing. We're going in the right direction, not the wrong direction.
Aloysius Okun, and you have a question on health care.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the NBC for giving me this opportunity, and I thank God for allowing me to be here today. Mr. President, I'm a temporary worker and applied for a job in a number of places. The reply always comes, you're not qualified for the job, and I applied for a temporary agency. Within a day, I was called and sent to work with a company or maybe other company which I've previously applied, and I was not accepted. And this time, working as a temporary agent, I do not have any kind of benefit, no insurance, and working so hard, making too little. I want to ask, is the Labor Department aware of the agony that the temporary workers are going through in this country? If they do, what are they doing about it? My second question is, working so hard without any insurance, in your health care plan, what benefit would that apply to the temporary worker working so hard without any insurance at all? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I think a lot of you probably know this, but one of the reasons for the explosion of temporary workers in America may be that the employers don't have to pay for the benefits. You know, that may be one reason. So that's one thing that's happening. Under our plan, here's how it would work. If a temporary worker worked 10 hours a week or more, the employer would have to pay a portion of the health insurance premium for the employee, and the employee would have to pay a portion, and then we'd have a pool, a government-funded pool that would pay the rest. Because it isn't fair to make the employer pay the whole thing, for example, if the temporary worker is only working 20 hours a week or 15 or 10. They would pay a portion. Then if it was 30 or more, the employer would just have to cover the temporary worker as long as the worker worked for the employer as if the employer were a regular employee. So you would be covered as a temporary worker always, and I think that's very important. Let me just make one related point. I have spent a lot of the last 12 years of my life trying to figure out how to help people who are on welfare get off of welfare and go to work. We just made a big change in the tax laws in America, cutting income taxes for almost 17% of the American people who work for very modest wages and are just above the poverty line, because we want to make sure that people always have an incentive to work. The next big problem is making sure people have health care. A center here, right here in Charlotte, North Carolina, just reported in the last couple of days that having interviewed welfare recipients in Tennessee and North Carolina, 83% of them said they would take a minimum wage job and leave welfare if they had health coverage for their children. So that, I'm just supporting what this gentleman's saying. That's why it's very important. Our plan would cover that for you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our next question, once again, from Roanoke.
And it is related to the previous questioner's question tonight, but from a different perspective. I'm here with George Harvey. He's a small business owner who's concerned with the rising cost of health care insurance under the new health care reform plan. Mr. Harvey?
Yes. What I would like to express as a small business person, we have 70 employees. I'm a GM dealer, and our present health cost is $39,000 a year. We computed the health cost on the new proposal that you have, where we would pay 80% of all the employees and all their dependents, and using the same insurance cost under that new proposal, our cost would be $184,000 a year, or a $144,000 increase. My question to you, sir, is will the government help small business people subsidize this cost, and if they will, what percent will it be?
Well, first of all, is 8% of payroll, is that what 8% of payroll is for you?
Question, what was that?
Would 8% of payroll be $180,000?
80%. 80% is your proposal, sir.
I know, but there is a ceiling of even for the most prosperous businesses, no one can pay more than 7.9% of payroll. For businesses, small businesses that are eligible for a discount, it can go down as low as 3.5% of payroll. That's the maximum, and a sliding scale in there. So let me ask you a question. We don't want to take everybody else's time on this. I would appreciate it if you would actually write to me personally and send me this information. The short answer to your question is no employer can pay more than 7.9% of payroll under our plan. Today, on average, American employers pay between 8 and 9.5% of payroll for health care. Small businesses with low average wages are eligible for discounts that will take the payroll cost down as far as 3.5% of payroll. I would not favor a small business mandate unless we could provide a discount to small businesses, because there are too many that can't afford it. I will say this, though, since you talked about the car dealership, I grew up in the car business. And I had a car dealer from Arkansas and his family staying with me the other night, and he pointed out he provided health insurance for 20 years, as you have, and his is right at 8% of payroll. And he said none of his competitors had done it, but he put 3 competitors out of business even though he had to pay it because he never lost any employees. So it's hard for me to believe that your payroll costs would be that great with only 70 employees. And that's why I'd like for you to ask you to write. There's a ceiling of 7.9% for all businesses. Small businesses, depending on their size and their wage, are eligible for discounts that could go down to a low of 3.5%. That's how it would work.
Mr.
Here with us. Due to the rise in teen pregnancy, do you plan to increase the amount of sex education given in schools?
I think we should. It is largely a decision to be made at the local school district level. But I have worked on this problem for a long time. When I was a governor, I worked on it. And what I can tell you what I have seen from my own experience works, what I believe works. I believe if you have programs in the schools which are supported by community leaders, including religious leaders, which do 2 things. Number one, tell young people that the only completely safe way to avoid teen pregnancy is to abstain from sex. But that also, here is how your body works. Here's what causes this. Here's how families are built. Here's how it all works. And here's what you should do to protect yourself so that you do not get in a position where you have an unwanted premature pregnancy. I think those kind of clinics work. I know they do. I have seen them work if they are supported by the community. And I could give you example after example where it's happened. I personally believe it is a great mistake to pretend that this problem doesn't exist and to say that somebody else is going to handle it. This goes back to what this gentleman said. If we don't deal with this in the schools, I don't know where it will be dealt with. Now, I know a lot of religious leaders think that if you discuss this in the schools, you'll be encouraging children to have sexual relations prematurely. I personally don't believe that because of the evidence. I think it's better to tell kids the truth, tell them they ought not to do it, tell them if they do it, here are the consequences and here's how to deal with it. That's what I think. I think we should be very upfront. But it only works. I've seen this issue tear communities apart. It only works if you bring the community people, including the leaders of the community of faith in, on the front end and honestly and frankly discuss this. I saw a community in my state where a Methodist minister sat on a committee that voted to give the nurse in the health clinic the authority to distribute condoms. I saw another community which voted against doing it. Both communities had a decline in teen pregnancy because they agreed on the values that would be pressed, and they tried to get these kids to save their own lives and their future. So I think, we can push it at the national level, but there has to be a belief at the local level that your life and your generation's life is worth fighting for.
Remaining, I'd like to have you, if you will, please reflect on what you've heard here tonight. 90 minutes worth of questions. It's gone very fast, and you've answered a variety of questions. What will you take back to Washington with you from tonight?
A deeply rewarding sense that the American people love this country, and that most people in this country get up every day and go to work and do the very best they can with their jobs and with their families and with their communities. And they want me and they want those of us who live in Washington not to become diverted from their business. I mean, we have some serious problems, but don't forget, folks, we also have some great strengths in this country. We still got the strongest economy in the world. We've still got the most flexible economy with the greatest chance to make the changes we need to make to go into the 21st century as the greatest country in the world. And the only thing that could divert us, the only thing that can defeat us is ourselves. And so, I also think, frankly, I've been reassured that I think you all have a pretty realistic idea about what it is that I have to do and what it is that you have to do. We all got jobs to do. Some things have to be done by the President and the Congress. Some things have to be done by the private sector and community leaders. Some things have to be done by the state and local government. And I try always to think about how I can be a leader with a voice for all the people and still be very upfront with the American people about what I have to do and what y'all have to do, because these are things we have to do together. The government cannot solve all the problems of the country, but together we can solve the problems of the country, and together we can move ahead. And I always come away with this. I come away here so much more energized and optimistic because I think people are realistic and yet hopeful out here. I don't think the American people are as cynical as sometimes people in public life think they are. I think you all still believe in yourselves and your potential in your country.
Congress coming back from its break, and I'll just ask you just in a few seconds, have you heard anything here tonight that will change your agenda when you go back to Washington?
No, but I'm going to tell them that near as I can tell, the people sure wanted to pass that crime bill and not fool around with it. Do it right away.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. President.